Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here because honestly, the story we're diving into today is just mind-blowing. We are unpacking a truly fascinating historical and theological narrative straight from the ancient text of 2 Chronicles chapter 18. And look, we're not just dusting off some boring ancient history here, we are looking at a real-life drama full of political intrigue, literal battlefield betrayal, and some pretty profound ultimate truths that absolutely still resonate today. We're going to break the whole shebang down step by step, so let's jump right in. Okay, I want you to picture this massive paradox for a second. Imagine you're heading straight into a fierce life-or-death battle. You've got two choices. Disguise yourself as a common foot soldier to blend into the chaos, or ride out in shining, unmistakable royal robes, essentially making yourself a glowing neon target for the enemy. Logically, human calculation tells us the soldier in disguise is playing it safe, right? Well, keep this vivid image in your mind, because this exact scenario actually plays out between two ancient kings, and the outcome, it completely defies human logic. But to understand how these two leaders end up in this crazy situation, we have to rewind a bit. Section 1. A divided nation unites. Our source draws a pretty brilliant analogy here to set the stage. So after King Solomon, ancient Israel actually split into two fiercely divided rival nations, northern Israel and southern Judah. And for 100 years, they fought bitterly. Our source compares this century-long split to the modern 70-year division we see today between North and South Korea. After that much time passes, generations come and go, right? The sheer animosity of wanting to completely conquer one another kind of fades into this reluctant acceptance. They slowly start viewing each other not as breakaway territories they need to reclaim, but as entirely separate sovereign nations. And because of that massive mental shift, a wildly unprecedented alliance suddenly becomes possible. And that brings us to a major turning point in our story. A common enemy, the nation of Aram, has swooped in and encroached on this territory called Ramoth-Gilead. The northern king, Ahab, who, by the way, is immensely wealthy and overseeing a highly prosperous, albeit very worldly era for Israel, decides he wants this land back. So, what does he do? He recruits the southern king, Jehoshaphat of Judah, to form a joint military campaign. For the first time in a literal century, the kings of the north and south are marching out together as allies. But, as we're about to see, political handshakes rarely erase personal cunning. Section 2, the battlefield trap. Right before they step foot onto the battlefield, a prophet named Micaiah is brought in to consult. And Micaiah delivers this grim, chilling warning. He says this campaign is absolutely doomed and the king of Israel is not going to survive it. Now, Ahab, projecting this absolute rock-solid outward confidence, completely ignores the warning. He actually throws Micaiah into prison for his insolence. But here is the absolutely crucial point. Despite his big show of power, Ahab is secretly terrified. This prophecy, it gets completely under his skin. Which leads to literally one of the most stunning acts of betrayal in ancient military history. Ahab turns to his supposed ally Jehoshaphat and says, "I will disguise myself and go into battle, but you wear your royal robes." You guys, Ahab is trying to outsmart divine prophecy using human calculation. By taking off his crown and hiding in the ranks, he genuinely thinks he can evade his predicted doom. But in doing so, he is intentionally leaving his partner, Jehoshaphat, standing out there like a glowing beacon. It's just a shocking, cold-blooded manipulation. So think about it. What happens when you are the only one wearing a crown in a massive war zone? Section 3, the royal target. Well, across enemy lines, the forces of Aram had exactly one tactical objective. The king of Aram gave his chariot commanders a very, very explicit order. Ignore the foot soldiers, ignore the generals, and hunt down only the king of Israel. Suddenly, Ahab's cowardly disguise looks like an act of absolute tactical genius, doesn't it? He's out there dressed like a nobody, totally invisible to these enemy commanders who are solely scanning the horizon for royal insignia. And this brilliantly, but tragically, illustrates the horrific reality for Jehoshaphat. The Araman commanders spot a man in full, shining royal attire. They completely bypass the regular troops and just swarm him. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated terror Jehoshaphat must have felt in this exact moment. He realizes he has been completely played. Because of his inability to just say no to Ahab, because of his worldly compromise to join this sketchy fight in the first place, he is about to pay the ultimate price. He is surrounded, heavily outmatched, and facing certain death. Now let's do a bit of textual sleuthing here, because this is where the source material gets incredibly rich. The exact same battle is actually recorded in two different ancient texts. 1 Kings 22 offers a very standard, objective view. Basically, the commanders realized it wasn't Ahab, so they stopped chasing him. Makes sense. But notice the theological secret revealed over in 2 Chronicles 18. It states that when Jehoshaphat cried out, the Lord helped him, God moved them to depart. It wasn't merely a lucky case of mistaken identity, it was an active, invisible divine intervention redirecting the enemy's minds right at the split second he called for help. Okay, so while Jehoshaphat barely escapes with his life, what about the architect of this whole scheme? Section 4, the random arrow. Let's see how Ahab is doing. So Ahab is out there in the chaos, completely disguised, probably feeling pretty safe and smug. But our source highlights a very specific, deeply fascinating word used in the original text to describe how an arrow is fired into the battle. The word translates to randomly, or in Korean, musimko. It literally means to do something innocently, without any aim whatsoever, or without a specific target in mind. An Armenian soldier simply pulls back his bow and lets an arrow fly up into the sky with zero intention. He wasn't aiming at a king. Honestly, he wasn't really aiming at anyone in particular. But listen to this. That completely unaimed arrow travels through the chaotic air, entirely bypassing thousands of shields, and strikes Ahab perfectly in the tiny, microscopic seam where his armor plates meet. It's a fatal wound, and Ahab slowly dies as the sun sets on the battlefield. The dramatic irony here is absolutely staggering, isn't it? Ahab threw off his royal robes, strapped on heavy armor, and hid himself among thousands of men just to escape a spoken prophecy. But no disguise, no amount of armor, and no human cunning can hide a person from the ultimate truth of God's word. The arrow had zero human target, but it was guided perfectly by divine providence. And this leaves us with a profound contrast between these two leaders. Why did one survive while the other perished? Section 5. The power of a cry. We have to understand Jehoshaphat's survival wasn't because he was some completely innocent, perfect guy. After all, he foolishly walked right into Ahab's trap, but when he was surrounded, he cried out. To really understand the weight of that cry, our source points us to a later prayer of Jehoshaphat recorded in 2 Chronicles 20, verse 12. He prays, "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." That right there is the core difference. Ahab stubbornly relied on his own deceit and his own armor to save himself. Jehoshaphat survived because he was willing to drop his pride, admit his total helplessness, and rely entirely on God's mercy in his absolute darkest second. So what does a dusty, ancient battlefield mean for us today? That brings us to Section 6, Standing Before the Truth. The application here is incredibly direct for all of us. First off, don't be an Ahab. We have to stop hiding behind disguises, worldly calculations, or superficial armor when we are dealing with the truth. It just doesn't work. Second, we really need to acknowledge when our own compromises, our inability to say no, or our desperate desire to just fit in, have put us in terrible situations. Own it. And third, even when a crisis is entirely self-inflicted, even when it's your own fault, do not let pride keep you silent. Cry out for help. Drop the act, drop the armor, and admit you don't have all the answers. And that brings us to our final, deeply encouraging takeaway from today's explainer. Look, you might feel like you've wandered onto a battlefield of your own making right now. You might feel like you're wearing a massive target on your back entirely because of your own mistakes and compromises. But the beautiful truth from this text is that God hears even our smallest, most desperate groans. He is perfectly capable of redirecting the absolute worst of our self-made crises when we finally stop pretending and just look up. So I want to leave you with this one thought to chew on. What disguises are you still wearing today, and is it finally time to take them off and just ask for help? Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive, and I really hope this incredible piece of history leaves you ready to face your own battles with just a bit more clarity and courage. Catch you next time.